Have you ever noticed that air conditioners don't work in winter? It was summer in Chicago, and it was so hot that you could light a cigarette just by sticking it out the window. The small air conditioner that was in my office gave up 2 days earlier with a death rattle and groan. I could literally feel the sweat dripping from my armpits. I would have preferred to be sitting on a stool at Plato's place sipping a cool drink, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I couldn't leave. I was waiting for my hour-long appointment and could not miss the opportunity to look at the lady who was going to visit me. Last time I heard such a sultry voice. I didn't even recognize her name. She hung up without calling him. All I knew was that her husband was missing. I heard the click of her high heels in the hallway and saw her shadow as she stopped to read the black lettering on the frosted glass of my door. Blake McDaniels, private investigation. I quickly buttoned the top button of my shirt and adjusted my tie as the door opened. I've seen a lot of beautiful women in my time, but this one was straight out of Vogue or Vanity Fair. I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall, and she looked only 4 or 5 inches shorter. Her long blonde hair was professionally styled and framed a gorgeous face with high cheekbones and sparkling blue eyes that could devour a man's soul like a Doberman pines a piece of raw meat. The expensive women's suit she wore did little to hide the body it covered, and the longest legs I had ever seen were hidden in a short skirt to hide treasures a man would kill for. Standing up, I extended my hand as she crossed the 3 meters between the door and my desk on the other side of the room. Blake McDaniels, I introduced myself. Mrs. Richardson, she answered, sitting down in the chair opposite my desk and crossing her long legs. Mrs. Arthur Richardson. I saw how amused she was by the shock on my face. Yes, that's right, Mr. McDaniels, the same Arthur Richardson who made a fool of you a couple of years ago. She wasn't joking. Her husband was embezzling funds from his company. His business partner knew about it, but couldn't prove it, so he hired me. I ran a scam on Richardson that got him going and caught him in the cookie jar. He was charged and went to court, where everyone thought he was convicted. Unfortunately, he hired a clever out-of-town swindler who discredited me, the main witness, and Richardson got off. This was not only bad for my ego, but also bad for business. It took me over a year to come to terms with this. I have to say, Mr. McDaniels, you are exactly what I imagined a private detective to be. Oh, and what is this? Tall, well-built, a little intimidating. That nose looks like it has been broken more than once, and the scar above your left eye and the other on your cheek indicate that you do not accept anyone's favors. I had to grin. She figured me out well. So, Mrs. Richardson, how can I help you? I'm offering you the opportunity to balance the scales, Mr. McDaniels. Somehow Art found out that I was going to divorce him and left for parts unknown. He doesn't care about me, but divorce will cost him dearly financially, and he knows it. My ears stood on end when she mentioned that this idiot costs money. How long was he gone? A little over a month. Have you contacted the police? Yes. They forced me to write a missing person report, but they didn't seem too interested in it. Like me, they believe that he is somewhere playing house with his girlfriend. They showed me how to download something onto my phone. They said it would show me the location of his phone once he used it, but nothing ever showed up. I know you don't take infidelity cases, but you do take missing persons cases, so here's my offer. I'll pay you $20,000 plus the cost of finding my husband, and a bonus of $50,000 if you do. At the same time, you will find evidence of his betrayal of me. Do you suspect him of treason? Oh, I know he's cheating. He has at least 2 mistresses, and I am sure that he is already cohabiting with one of them. From which one? I don't know and I don't care. I just want him to be found so I can get him to serve. I reached over and pulled out a contract from the bottom drawer of my desk and filled it out to reflect her offer. $20,000 to find her hubby, another $50 if I got proof of infidelity, and a $5,000 fee to get started. She signed without even reading. I don't have all $5,000 with me, she said, taking money out of her purse, but I'll ask someone to give it to you tomorrow afternoon if you don't mind. I accept checks, I told her. I want you to start right now. I wouldn't want you to have to wait for the check to clear, she explained. I took $3,000 in cash and gave her the receipt, then spent the next hour asking questions. Does he have friends or relatives he could stay with? How much cash did he take? Does she know where he might have more money? Did he own property out of state? Did he drive his own car? She told me his driver's license number and all the credit card, social security, and bank account numbers she knew about. But she suspected he had others she didn't know about. She knew nothing about his business dealings or his partners. I knew that he was forced to leave the company where he committed theft, but I did not follow him after the trial. As Mrs. Richardson left my office, I watched her ass sway from side to side and didn't notice any panties under her tight skirt. Damn, she's been sitting here without any panties this whole time. I wondered if it was because of the heat, or if she was trying to use her feminine charms as an incentive to take her case. If so, then she needn't have worried. I was going to hand him those papers myself when I found him, just to see the look on that bastard's face. Without interrupting my work, I was doing something else. Our state's lieutenant governor was just as crooked as anyone else. A couple of months before, I received anonymous information about a real estate scheme in which he was involved. A little preliminary investigation convinced me that the tip was legitimate. I hate dirty cops and politicians, but I had to be extremely careful. I was playing in the big boy's sandbox. If I had shown my hand before receiving the evidence, I could have lost my license and possibly ended up in jail myself. No thanks. A missing persons case will allow me to take my mind off things a bit and also allow my scent to disappear. If someone from the office, vice governor, will be snooping around. Besides, I owed Richardson. Once he made a monkey out of me, it's time to return the favor. I sat down at the computer and started putting together a summary using the information I received from my wife, but I got nowhere. I didn't think it would be easy. The asshole was smart. I made the mistake of underestimating him once, and I wasn't going to do it again. I needed a starting point, some kind of clue. I would take whatever I could get. Where better to start than at the end? It had been 2 years since I had been in the office of Richardson and Walker Industrial Lighting, although it was now just Walker Industrial Lighting. I could tell from the look on her face that his secretary recognized me when I entered. I took out a business card. I know who you are, Mr. McDaniels, but I don't see your name on Mr. Walker's appointment calendar, and, frankly, I don't expect to see it there in the future. I can't say I was surprised by this reception. Listen, doll, just tell him that I know a way to get revenge on our common sworn enemy. She just looked at me for a few seconds. Go sit over there, she ordered. I'll see if he can talk to you. Not knowing how long he would keep me waiting, or whether he would even see me, I sat down in the chair and reached for the magazine. I barely had time to open it when I heard his door open on the other side of the room. I looked up and saw him standing there, frowning. What's the matter, McDaniels? Did you give our money back? No, I answered. Most likely they are gone forever, but with your help we can take a little revenge. He turned and retreated to his office, but left the door open. I took this as an invitation. Upon entering, I sat down in a chair, and he, with the same gloomy expression on his face, sat at his desk. I don't even know why I'm listening to you. The last time I did this, you assured me that the company would return the money that asshole embezzled. Not only did we not get the money back, but I had to pay your fee as well, so say what you want to say, and it better be good, or I might have security throw your ass out the window. I knew he was pissed, but come on. As far as I know, they didn't even have security. However, I didn't intend to annoy him. I hoped that he could give me a lead. After telling him that Richardson's wife had hired me to find him, I explained to him the reason. I hope to serve him the divorce papers myself, I told him. When this happens, you can always say that they were obtained with your help. I didn't expect it, but it brought a small smile to his face. What do you want from me? Everything you can know about his habits when he worked here, the people he knew, the places he went to get away from it all. Anything you can think of that might help me find him, maybe. A small hiding place where he took his women. His wife thinks he has a girlfriend but doesn't know who it might be, I said. Damn, guys like that go through mistresses like an alligator through a swamp, he said. I know about 2 women with whom he had fun then, but that was 2 years ago. Who knows how many girlfriends he's had since then? Anything you can think of? I repeated. An old girlfriend might know his new girlfriend. You know what they say about a woman who is despised? He reached for the intercom button. Dory, could you come in here for a minute? A few seconds later, Walker's pretty secretary stood at his desk and smiled at him, looking at me. Damn, she was good at this. I bet she was one hell of an attractive Friday girl, not to mention a tigress in bed. I wondered if Walker knew about both. Dory, you interacted more with the two women Richardson dated than I did. Do you remember their names? I have their names, addresses, and telephone numbers. Mr. Walker. We both looked at her in shock. He asked me to send them flowers. I have their data on my computer. He also made me dial their numbers for him before he picked up the phone. I just stumbled upon the mother lode. Inspired, I began to achieve more. What about a secret love nest where he would put his honey at night and where his wife would never be able to find them? Sorry, she said sarcastically. I don't know such a place. Dory, you can print out everything you have on these two women and anything else that you think might help in finding Richardson. He's missing, and we're going to help McDaniels find him. She looked at her boss with an expression that said, I'll do it, but I don't like it. She turned and walked back to her desk. Walker turned his attention back to me. Okay, Dory will make a printout for you. Leave her your business card in case she comes up with something else. You know I'm only doing this because I want to see Richardson suffer, right? Don't think I think you're anything more than an asshole. I stood up without shaking hands with him and joined Dory at her table. She was already holding the printout. This is all I have, she said, handing me a piece of paper. Rummaging in the pocket of my sports jacket, I pulled out the very business card that she had not accepted when I first entered. Your boss said I should give this to you in case you find something else, I said, placing it on the table. I felt pretty good. At least I had a lead, maybe two. When I left the air-conditioned building, the heat outside hit me like a blast furnace. I was already thinking about stopping by Platon's when I got an uneasy feeling that I was being watched. If 20 years as a private investigator has taught me anything, it's that you should never ignore your intuition. Lighting up a cigarette, I looked around carefully. I didn't see any suspicious characters, at least not any more than you usually see in downtown Chicago. But I couldn't shake the feeling. If I was being followed, the last thing I wanted to do was lead them straight to my only two leads. I decided to return to my office. When I entered, the first thing I did was take off my jacket and shoulder holster. Taking my Beretta, I placed it in the top drawer of my desk, then went to the top drawer of my file cabinet and grabbed a bottle of Dewar's White Label and a glass. I needed to think. I only had two cases, Richardson and the lieutenant governor. And then it dawned on me. Of course, if I was hiding from someone, I would want to know what they were doing to find me. Richardson kept an eye on his wife. Thus, he was always one step ahead of her. Damn, he was a smart Special Forces soldier. I looked around my office. Could he have listened to it while I was away? At that moment, I decided that paranoia was my friend. I put everything back on and left my glass of Dewar's on the table as I left the office. Then he went around the corner to a small diner to get something to eat. When I finished, I walked into the back room, past the men's room sign, and out the back door. Returning to the car, I drove to a little-known electronics store. Angie for short, has always been my ace in the hole. He heard the little bell above the door as I entered and came out of the back room to greet me. Hey, Blake, what's wrong? Hey, Angie, have you ever felt like you were being watched? He laughed. Not in my business. I took out my phone and placed it on the counter in front of him. Could you scan this for me? I think I'm being followed. They might also be bugging my office. I'm not sure. Angie connected my phone to the computer and checked it. Phone is fine, Blake. Good news, I told myself. Okay, thank you. Can you come to my office sometime and scan it? Yes, of course, he said, looking at the clock on the wall. I can leave here in an hour. That would be great, Angie, thank you. I will be there. This wasn't the first time he checked my office for bugs. We had a normal routine. He said he was nearby and came by to say hello. We carried on a normal conversation while he scanned the room. That way, if he found the bug, we wouldn't alert whoever left it. Of course, he found it 15 minutes later. It was very professionally installed into the rail of my Venetian blinds. Whoever Richardson hired was no amateur. We left the bug in place. "Come on, Angie, I'll take you downstairs," I said, in the interest of our spy. Once in the corridor and out of range of the listening device, I called my client. She answered on the third ring. "It was fast. I left your office just a few hours ago." "Well, I have good news and bad news, Mrs. Richardson." I heard her sigh. "Okay, tell me the good news first." "I have 2 promising leads," I told her. "It's good news." "What's the bad news?" "Your husband is watching you." "What? How do you know?" In this business, sometimes some kind of sixth sense develops. Mine told me that I was being followed today. On a whim, I checked my office for listening devices and found one. "How do you know that this is art? Maybe it's from one of your other cases?" "Think about it, Mrs. Richardson. What better way to prevent you from finding him than to know your every move?" "That sneaky asshole," she growled. "Your husband is not a fool, that's for sure. Either way, we can use this to our advantage." "How?" I explained my plan, but it was already late, and we decided to wait until the next day. At 10 o'clock the next morning, she burst into my office. "Why didn't you tell me that you were the same private detective who created all the problems a couple of years ago?" she shouted. I calmly handed her the phone with a note in which I wrote that she should use it in the future if she needed to call me. She nodded her head to acknowledge that she understood and placed the rest of the fee on my desk before continuing. "If I had known who you were, I would never have hired you." "Well, I'm going to fix that right now." Fired. "Wait a minute," I begged, but she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her, almost breaking the glass. "Damn," I said out loud, leaning back in my chair with a big smile. I didn't like Derek Knudsen. He was a private asshole. I use this term specifically for him because he gave private detectives a bad name. Mrs. Richardson was on her way to his office, where she would give him a fake name and write all sorts of nonsense. After wasting a little of his time, she will flash her pretty blue eyes at him and leave, leaving him to wonder what it was. Of course, someone who followed her would think that she fired me and hired him. Like a tick on a dog, they will focus all their efforts on Knudsen and leave me alone. I still needed to give her some time to make sure my plan would work. So I ran to do some chores around the house and then stopped by Plato's place for a couple drinks. Stan, my favorite bartender, saw me walk in and was already waiting with a frosty mic by the time I sat down. We have known each other for a long time. He even dated my ex-wife for some time. We shot for a couple of minutes until he minded his own business and went to work. I was left thinking about my new business. A common battle cry in my profession is, follow the money. Unfortunately, I tried this 2 years ago and got nowhere. Richardson was the best I've ever seen at burying dead presidents. The fact is that everyone has a weakness, some kind of vice that makes him vulnerable. From what I knew of Richardson, his vice was women. Instead of trying to go after money again, I decided it would be better to spend my time looking for signs of broken hearts. As I told Walker, you know what they say about a woman being scorned. By the way, about this, I was wondering what Stacy was doing. 40 minutes later, I found myself ringing her doorbell. The door opened, and on the other side stood an absolute vision of female attractiveness. With her natural red hair and sparkling green eyes, Stacy stood out in any crowd. The black bodycon dress and high heels showed off a figure that could rival any supermodel. Hell, if you weren't my ex-wife, I'd get down on one knee and propose right now. She giggled. Excuses, excuses. Sorry, Stace, I should have called. I didn't know you were on a date. Yes, she said, opening the door a little wider. Come in, I just need to grab my purse. Going inside, I looked around for her companion, but saw no one. I don't want to interfere, Stace. I'll leave. You can't do it without me. She stood and looked at me with a purse in her hand. Have you decided where we will go yet? I was completely confused. I don't understand. You are dressed so smartly. Don't you have a date? I dressed up for you, you big fool. Now let's go, I'm hungry. Taking her arm, we walked to my car. I kept asking myself, how the hell did she know I was coming? I'm a detective. My job is to solve mysteries, and I won't be able to sleep until I solve this one. I waited until we were in the car before asking, Stacy, how the hell did you know I was coming? Telepathy, she answered. Telepathy? Yes, I wanted to go somewhere tonight, and I transmitted this thought to space. This only works for people in your spiritual orbit, so I knew you would be the one to receive my thoughts. Okay, I knew she had just said all this psychobabble, which meant she wasn't going to tell me about it, so I'd have to figure it out myself. Yes, exactly, I said, which made my beautiful passenger laugh. By the time it dawned on me, we had already placed our order. Oh, of course, I mentioned this to Stan when I left Plato. He called you. She didn't say anything, just smiled widely. Every time Stacy and I got together, we could count on sex to be part of the equation. We both got horny as hell just being in each other's company. By the time we got back to her apartment, we were tearing off our clothes. Will you stay the night? If this is an invitation, then I accept, I replied. Okay, I'll give you 20 minutes to recover. And then I want you to make love to me, she said, kissing my neck. Keep up the good work and you won't need 20 minutes. She smiled. Since when do you need an invitation? It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when we both ran out of gas. Stacy curled up in my arms as we drifted off to sleep. I was in that twilight zone just before sleep takes over you when I heard her mutter, I love you, Blake. As I expected, the bug in my office was gone by the next morning. Presumably it was hidden in some cozy place in Knutson's office. I wished I had time to enjoy my cleverness, but if Richardson was as smart as I thought, my little trick couldn't fool him forever, so I had to act. I had 2 names, Janet Stenson and Kathy Heyer. I've thoroughly tested both of them. From their driver's licenses, I could tell that Stenson had moved to a more upscale neighborhood than before. I found their Facebook pages, studied their faces so I knew them by sight, and wrote down everything else I thought might be helpful. Based on their social media pages, it looks like Heyer has moved too. I saw a couple of guys she seemed friendly with, but Janet Stenson didn't mention anyone with a Y chromosome. That, and the fact that she moved into a fancier apartment, made me wonder if she was dating Richardson. It was certainly worth taking a short trip to see what I could find out. I picked up the small digital voice recorder and put it in my pocket. They can come in handy in a variety of situations. I figured that anyone who contacted Richardson when I was trying to take him down knew who I was. So there was no reason to play vacuum cleaner salesman when Stenson rang the bell. It took her a few seconds to recognize me after she opened the door. What do you need? Miss Stenson, I greeted with a nod. May I come in? There were several options for the development of events. If she didn't know anything or wasn't dating Richardson again, she'd likely say no and close the door. If she was still with him and knew that his wife looking for his, then one of 2 things will happen. If she is not too smart, she will slam the door in my face. If she is smarter, she will invite me in and try to pump information out of me that she can pass on to her boyfriend. Yes, of course, come in, she answered, standing to the side. I didn't see anything about her work when I looked for her. Whoever her sugar daddy was had money. The apartment was a good size, with fairly expensive furniture. A good place. Thank you, she replied sharply. So, for what reason did you want to see me? I glanced at the leather sofa. Can I sit down? She sighed impatiently. Perhaps, she conceded. I walked over and sat down. On the coffee table, I noticed her phone. What I wouldn't give to look at it, but I couldn't figure out how to get her out of the room for that long. Miss Stenson, may I call you Janet? Yes, okay, haha. She suddenly became more friendly. She was going to pump information out of me, but next to me, she was just an amateur. Janet, Arthur Richardson is missing. His wife is worried sick and hired me to find him. Can I offer you a beer? She interrupted. This surprised me a little. I figured she needed time to think about her strategy, or maybe she thought the beer would loosen my tongue so she could get more out of me. Either way, it will give me an opportunity. That would be great, thank you. As soon as she disappeared into the kitchen, I took the recorder out of my pocket, turned it on, and stuck it under the sofa. It was voice-controlled and only recorded someone's conversation. I hoped she would call Richardson as soon as I left. I had one more trick up my sleeve. She quickly returned with a beer. She placed a leather coaster on the glass coffee table in front of me and placed a bottle of Michelob on it. "I don't know how I can help, Mr. McDaniels. Art was my friend, but I haven't seen him in years. His wife must be furious. Do you have any leads?" "Not yet. I was hoping that you could help me. Let's be honest, Janet. You were much more than just a friend. With all his money, I doubt a man like Richardson would take a risk using hotel rooms. I think he has a nice little hideout for after-school activities, somewhere out of the way where no one will see him." "So, you don't suspect that he was kidnapped or anything like that? Do you think he is hiding from his wife on purpose?" "At the moment, I am not ruling out anything, but I would really like to find his love nest. If it is not there, it may indicate foul play." "And what will happen if you find him?" "His wife is not a fool, Janet. If he is cohabiting with someone, let it be as it is. She just wants to make sure he's okay." "Yeah," she said, letting me know that she knew I was lying. "Tell me, Mr. McDaniels, why did she hire you?" "There are probably 100 private investigators in Chicago." "Janet, even though your boyfriend's expensive lawyer pulled him out, I actually got information on him. I'm good at my job. I think Mrs. Richardson understands this." "I understand," she admitted. "I wish I could help you, but, like I said, I haven't seen Art in years, and we've never been in any kind of love nest together." I was surprised that the mistress of a man like Richardson couldn't lie better, but I knew that was the cue for me. I took a sip of beer, stood up, and put my business card on the table. "Well, if you can think of something—" "I'll definitely call you," she said, finishing the sentence for me. She walked me to the door, said goodbye, and closed the door. I knew her next move would be to call Richardson. The phone I saw was not supposed to be in a luxury apartment. It was a cheap pipe. When I first arrived and parked my car on the street, I noticed that the apartment building had a parking lot on the lower level, with a large roll-up gate. I saw one of the residents use the automatic garage door opener when he drove inside. I'm willing to bet that in such a stylish establishment, each resident has a designated parking space. All I had to do was get inside. To do this, I opened the trunk and took out Captain America's magic Dakota ring. Okay, it wasn't a ring, and it had nothing to do with Captain America, but that's what I thought of it. In fact, it was about the same size as a pack of cigarettes. Most of the houses in this area had pretty good door locks. Not that I couldn't pick them, but it could take a long time. They also had built-in garages with automatic overhead door openers operating on radio frequencies. Most people rarely locked the attached door, so once they entered the garage, they could simply walk into the house. I bought my little gadget a few years earlier at Angie's electronics store. All I had to do was press a button when someone used the garage door opener, and my little toy would recognize the frequency and duplicate it. After that, I could use it to move in and out of the garage at any time. All I could do was wait outside Janet's house until one of the residents came home. It could have lasted for hours, but I was lucky. 10 minutes after I left her apartment, a Beamer pulled up. When I pressed the button, I saw the red light turn on, indicating that it was working. I waited a few minutes before going inside, then closed the door behind me. I was right about the parking spaces. It only took me a minute to find Janet's place. "Jesus," I said out loud. "Mercedes Cabriolet convertible. She must be something special in bed." Now all I had to do was find a place under the car where there was enough metal to hold the magnetic tracking device when driving over potholes. On a whim, I tried to open the door, and, to my shock, it opened. Stupid woman. I reached under the seat and attached the device to the inside of the frame. Once again, it was a waiting game. My tracking receiver would alert me as soon as Janet's car started moving, so to avoid appearing suspicious, I drove around the block a few times before finding another parking spot and waiting again. Night fell a few hours ago, and I was beginning to think that I would have to spend the night in the car when I heard my radio start beeping. I pulled out to follow her and saw her taillights as she drove away. I followed her to a grocery store a few blocks from her house. Taking out my binoculars, I watched as she entered the well-lit building. I saw her take one of the large carts, which I assumed meant she would be there for a while. This was my opportunity to return the recorder. I hurried back to the apartment building, used my magic decoder ring to enter through the garage, and took the elevator up to the second floor. Household locks are not easy to pick, but the locks that developers buy for apartment buildings are child's play. Taking a master key and a torsion spring from my pocket, I found myself inside her apartment in less than 20 seconds. Without wasting any time, I took out the recorder and quickly returned to the car. Several recordings were recorded, but most lasted only a few seconds. I figured she was talking to herself when she was alone. However, the first recording lasted just over 8 minutes. I knew that this would only be one side of the conversation, but I hoped for a miracle and almost got it. "Hello, it's me. Yes, this is very important. You'll never guess who was just here asking questions. Blake McDaniels. Yes, he said your wife hired him to find you because she's worried about you. Yes, I know. I don't know. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy, but it's possible, I guess. When? Okay. What should I bring? Well, I don't know. Is it even possible to cook on a yacht? I have no idea. Okay, I'll go in the evening. I don't want to leave right now in case he's still there. Of course, I'll make sure he doesn't follow me. I'll go at 3 o'clock in the morning. There will be only a few cars on the road, and I will be able to determine that someone is following me. What about the apartment, the car, all my things? Okay, I'll see you early, Friday morning. I love you, honey. I didn't need Sherlock Holmes's powers of deduction to figure out they were running. I looked at my watch. It was 11 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. I had 28 hours to get everything ready, but at that time I couldn't do anything else, so I went home to get some sleep. The next morning, I called Mrs. Richardson. Hello? Mrs. Richardson, this is Blake McDaniels. Could you please drop off the divorce papers at my office sometime today? If not, I can come and pick them up. Have you found him? Yet? She almost shouted. I never gave assurances to clients until everything was firmly filed. Not exactly, I told her, but I have a very good lead. If everything works out, I'll be looking your future ex in the eyes tomorrow morning. No one will give him these papers except me, she said. No, this is not a very good idea. First of all, I'm going to leave around 2:30 in the morning. Secondly, I have no idea what your husband's reaction will be. It's possible he has a gun. I don't know, but I don't want to worry about you or myself. I don't care. That's why I hired you. Just don't forget to take your gun with you. I doubt he will become aggressive. He'll be angry, but I don't think he'll actually try to do anything. Either way, I'll be there. I'm going to hand him these papers, looking him straight in the eyes. She spoke like a woman on a mission, and she was not going to be convinced otherwise. Okay, I sighed, but today at 2:30, you must be in my office. You can't be late. I won't be late, Mr. McDaniels. I will be there. I needed to make a couple more calls, but after that, I had nothing else to do. Called Stacy to see if she was free for lunch. I met her at DeMar's, a cute little restaurant, a couple blocks from where she works. When I sat down at the table, she was a little quieter than usual. Hello, beautiful. How is my girl doing? Yeah, she said, looking away. What's the matter, baby? Are you having a bad day? I'll tell you after we order, she replied. We had already met there several times for lunch, so it didn't take long to order. The waitress wrote everything down in a notepad and left with the menu. A minute later, she returned with coffee and said that our orders would be delivered soon. So, dollface, why are you so gloomy? She took her coffee cup with both hands and stared at it for a few seconds. I got the impression that whatever the problem was, it was important. Last night you made a comment. You said that if I weren't already your ex-wife, you would have proposed to me. Yes. Have you ever really thought about this, about the proposal? Her question took me by surprise. As the song says, we got married in a rush. Those days, I was either on a mission or with Stacy. A friend introduced us. That same night, we destroyed a set of motel sheets and nearly broke the bed. 4 months later, we were saying I do in a wedding chapel in Vegas, and a guy dressed like Elvis pronounced us husband and wife. We lived like this for almost a year before we realized that my profession and marriage were not the best combination. Stacy, we already tried it, remember? I'm still a private detective. I still have crazy hours. Damn, I'm leaving at 2:30 tonight to look for a missing person. I don't even know where I'm going or how long I'll be back. Well, we're just older now, Blake, more experienced. When we first got married, I wasn't ready. I knew what you did for a living, but I didn't know what it entailed. Now I know. Blake, after our divorce, I dated a lot of guys, but I never found anyone who could take your place. I just can't get you out of my head. I was stunned. I had no idea what to say. She picked up her cup and took a sip, still holding it in both hands. Well, what do you think? Now you have to tell me that you still love me, she said hesitantly. The truth is, Stacy, I still love you. It's because I love you that I think this is a bad idea. Do you really think that you won't worry when I'm away on business? You don't think that you won't torment yourself with constant questions about where I am and whether everything is okay with me? She looked up at me. I have a friend at work. Her husband is a fireman. They have been married for 20 years. She told me how she copes. If she can handle it, then I can handle it, Blake. Just at this time, our food arrived. The thought of being married to Stacy again wasn't disgusting, but I was sincerely hesitant. I need to think, Stace. Give me some time. She looked down again with a sad smile, as if she knew my answer would be no. No pressure, Blake. I just thought it was worth mentioning. This put a bit of a damper on the rest of our lunch. As I said goodbye, I kissed her on the lips and told her that I would really think about her words. This seemed to cheer her up a little. I went back to my office and went through my to-do list again. I needed to make another confirmation phone call, but I wasn't going to make it until late in the evening. In the end, I decided to go home and try to get some sleep. For a while, this was my only chance. Unfortunately, Stacy's proposal over lunch kept playing in my head, like a song I couldn't stop thinking about. Around 8 o'clock, I finally gave up. Anyway, I'm already hungry. After making coffee, I put the frozen dinner in the microwave. I switched the TV to the menu and saw that the Oldies channel was showing several episodes of Mike Hammer, one after another. By the time Mike ran out of cases to solve, it was already 1 in the morning, so I jumped in the car and headed to the office. I needed to make one more call. Is everything ready? Great. See you at the party. Thank you. I double-checked that I had everything I needed, then sat back and waited for my client. She showed up 10 minutes early, holding a manila envelope the size of a legal document. After I briefly told her what we would be doing, she asked if I had a gun on me. I assured her that I would never leave the house without it. At 2:30, we were sitting outside Janet's house. I reached into the trunk, took out my homemade bracket, and secured it to the center console, then opened my laptop and snapped it onto the bracket. What are you doing? So we will track her. I have a program that works in conjunction with the transmitter I installed in her car. We'll let her get a couple of miles ahead before we start chasing her. She'll never know we're behind her. God, I'm impressed. It's like I'm riding with James Bond, Mrs. Richardson said with a slight grin. Not really, I answered. Bond's tracking device had a limited range. It is powered by satellites. Our unsuspecting prey could make it all the way to Montana, and we'd never lose it. Just in time, I said as the large garage door opened. We watched the silver cabriolet drive out. I checked my laptop screen and saw that the tracking device had already picked her up on Michigan Avenue heading north. As Sherlock would say, Mrs. Richardson, the game is in full swing. I watched her turn left onto Division before we pulled out. When she got onto northbound I-90, I knew we were in for a ride. It was a little after 5 when we pulled into Rockford. I saw that she had stopped, most likely to use the toilet. We did the same. I brought my passenger and myself a cup of coffee, and when I moved into the driver's seat, I saw that Janet was on the road again. This time we were driving on a 4-lane country road, so we had to be careful not to get too close. We had been driving for about 20 minutes before we saw another car. By this time, we had almost reached the Wisconsin border. Just before the crossing, Janet turned left onto a two-lane asphalt road. She drove a short distance, made another turn, and stopped. "We're there," I said. "Where?" "I don't see anything but trees." "There's a small lake ahead." She stopped at 1358 Pierce Drive. "It's right by the lake." "Well, come on, let's go. The sooner we get this over with, the better." We drove a little further until we spotted Janet's car. Having stopped, I turned off the engine so that they would not hear our arrival. We approached the cottage. I put my ear to the door and heard a man's voice. Slowly, I tried the door handle. It was open. Nodding to our companion, we rushed inside. Janet screamed, and I thought Richardson was going to shit himself. He looked angrily at his girlfriend. "You brought them straight to me!" he shouted. She was at a loss. Her mouth moved, but nothing came out. Their level of terror seemed out of proportion to the situation. "Here!" Richardson's soon-to-be ex shouted, throwing the envelope on the table in front of her husband. I watched to make sure Richardson wasn't trying to do anything and paid no attention to what was happening. When he took out the contents of the envelope, I noticed that the supposed divorce papers were nothing more than blank sheets of paper. Around this time, Mrs. Richardson reached into her purse and pulled out a chrome-plated .38 caliber revolver. The next moment, I realized that it was aimed at me. "Now, very carefully, Blake, draw your gun using only 2 fingers." My first thought was to wonder if a stylish lady like her knew how to use such a weapon. As I slowly reached for my pistol, I was about to make the decision to lunge at her, when suddenly Eric Wilson, Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, and the source of many long hours of investigation, entered the room. He had a mischievous grin on his face as he approached Mrs. Richardson. "I'll take it, honey," he said, taking the gun from her. I had no choice. I pulled my Beretta from my shoulder holster and held it with 2 fingers. "Now, place him carefully and calmly on the floor, then step back," Wilson ordered. I did what I was told. "Surprised?" he asked painfully. "These tracking devices are very convenient, aren't they? I had one in your car the whole time. You found the bug I installed in your office, but you didn't even check your car." He saw the surprised expression on my face. "I know you thought Richardson planted a bug in your office." When Carla told me this, we both had a good laugh. I looked at my former employer. "So you didn't even go to Knutson's office?" She laughed. "Why?" "I thought you would check your car, but you didn't," Wilson taunted. "That was very unprofessional of you, Blake." "Hey," I said, taking the situation a little too lightly. "Even I can't plan for everything." Wilson laughed. He and Carla were having a good time. "This will be a great epitaph on your tombstone." He didn't think of everything. Mrs. Richardson began to get nervous. "Come on, Eric, shoot him and let's get out of here." "Wait," I begged. "None of this makes any sense." "At least tell me why I'm going to die." "Just shoot him, honey." Whether she was beautiful or not, I really didn't like her. A wide smile slowly stretched across the vice governor's lips. "No, honey, he's right. He must know how he is being played. But first, take his gun." Mrs. Richardson picked up my pistol and joined Wilson again. "Did you really think that I wouldn't know that you were investigating me? Come on. Any 2-bit private detective will understand that a person in my position has eyes and ears everywhere. I was about to shoot you during a botched robbery attempt when Carla found her husband's foreign bank account numbers." Shocked, Richardson turned to his wife. "Did you find the numbers?" The evil grin on her face lifted the facade and clearly showed the cruelty of this woman. "That's right, lamb pie." "Then why all this? Why not just divorce me? You have more than enough reasons." She giggled. "Oh, Art, don't be a fool. Why take half when I can have it all?" I looked at Wilson again. "So you and Carla are together?" "Damn," he laughed. "McDaniels, you should be a detective." Art put in his 2 cents again. "I knew you were having fun with someone important," he told his wife. "I just didn't know with whom." "Tell me, why did you even marry me? Our marriage was a sham from day one." "Of course, because of the money, dear. You had more of them than all the other guys I was having fun with then." "Anyway," Wilson continued, "when she found the numbers, we decided to get rid of hubby. Unfortunately, he heard Carla mention his passing on the phone and ran away. That's when I came up with a brilliant idea, a way to kill two birds with one stone. Damn, everyone knows you and Art can't stand each other. He made a monkey out of you in open court. So when the cops get here, they'll find that you two shot each other. This gun, he said, lifting it slightly to show the one he was holding, is Art's. He left it when he ran away. So first I shoot you with his gun, then I shoot him with your gun. It's as simple as that. I can already see the headlines, he boasted, looking up as if reading a large inscription in the air. 2-year vendetta ends in gunfire, 2 killed. Oh yeah, it's just lovely. What about Janet? I asked. Yeah, sorry about that, he said, looking at her. You are what we call collateral damage. In other words, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. You'll never get away with this, I shouted. Of course it will do, that's not a question. 20 minutes after you left your office this evening, a guy walked in. He took the check you gave Carla for cash and the contract you made her sign, so there's absolutely nothing to tie us to you. He also forged a couple of threatening emails that he sent from your computer to Art's personal email address. As soon as we get back, he'll hack into Art's laptop and edit the emails to match when they were supposedly sent. Carla will swear that you came to their house and threatened him personally. Then he took his pistol and disappeared. Apparently you tracked him down to settle a score. It's foolproof, Blake. Staring down the barrel of a gun is no fun, but I had to know the whole story. I turned my face a little to the right and spoke into the microphone hidden under my collar. Can you hear everything, Lieutenant? Every word, came a voice from the doorway. Both would-be killers turned to see Lieutenant Dan Reardon of the Chicago Police Department and several Illinois State Police officers pointing guns at them. Eric's jaw hit the floor as Carla screamed. Hand over them, he demanded. Both Carla and Eric gave up their weapons. Eric looked back at me with an expression of complete shock. How? You couldn't know. It was reliable. How could you guess? I had to grin. Actually, if you told me you found those numbered bills, I probably wouldn't have guessed, I said, looking at Carla. Remember, I tried damn hard to find the money that your husband embezzled, and I didn't find anything. I knew that someone who was so good at making money disappear without a trace would have no problem hiding it from the divorce court. He'd convince the judge he was broke, and you'd get nothing. I also thought it was a little strange that you didn't want to give me a check for my fee. Not many women feel safe walking around with that much cash in their wallet. Then I found out that you lied to me. You said you went to the police and filed a missing persons report, but when I called to see if they were actively investigating, I was told there was no report. When I put everything together, something didn't smell right. I didn't fully understand it, but I felt like something was wrong. When you said that only you can give hubby these papers, I realized that everything that is happening will become clear when we get here. I called the lieutenant and told him my plan. You, I said, turning to Eric, were not the only one who was watching us. By the time I finished my little speech, Reardon had handcuffed the 2 criminals. Are you going to be okay? Yeah, I'll be fine, I replied as he handed me back my gun and put the other one in the evidence bag. I need a full recorded statement from you as soon as possible. I'll come tomorrow, I answered. We all watched from the doorway as the police put Wilson and Carla into separate cars and drove away. I need a drink, Richardson announced. How about you, Blake? Yes, I could use some whiskey neat. He looked at Janet, who was sitting at the small kitchen table. You are cute? Without saying a word, she simply looked up at him. Then we both saw that her hands were shaking and there were tears in her eyes. Richardson rushed to her side, knelt next to her, and hugged her. Oh, honey, everything is fine. Everything is fine. She hugged him and pressed her head against his chest. I thought we were going to die, she sobbed. I really thought we were all going to die. While Richardson tried to console her, I went to where he kept the drinks and poured 3 whiskeys. Here, I said, placing 2 of them on the table. It took a couple of hard drinks and almost an hour of soothing and coaxing from her boyfriend before Janet was able to speak in full sentences again. When she finally spoke again, her words made a lot of sense, at least to me. I was about to leave when she looked up at me. "Mr. McDaniels, we owe you our lives. I don't know how we can thank you enough. This didn't exactly sit well with Richardson." "Janet, he brought them straight to us." "Damn it, Art. They would have found us sooner or later anyway." "You know, when Carla found those bills, you were dead. She couldn't take the money from them if you were alive, but as your widow, she had legal access." At that moment, her face lit up with a smile. "Honey, I know how we can repay Blake for saving our lives. Get back the money you embezzled from your old company." "What?" Richardson shouted. "No way, honey." "Art, you told me you're worth about $9 million. Was it true?" "Yes, but how many of them did you steal?" "4 million, I intervened. She looked genuinely shocked. $4 million? She gasped, looking at Richardson. "Art, I'm not going to live on stolen money. 4 out of 9, that leaves $5 million. This is more than we could spend in 2 lifetimes. Honey, there is a reason why I appropriated this money." "I don't care," she replied. "It was wrong. It was illegal. I want you to return the money." "How will the fact that I return the money help him?" "It will restore his authority. That's how it is," she replied. Once again, I had to put in my 2 cents. Not to mention the 10% search reward I'll get. She looked up at Richardson. "You see," she grinned. "Darling, if you love me as much as you say, then you will return it." Richardson was apparently as good at talking to the ladies as he was at hiding money. I knew it would snow in hell before he handed over the money, so I left them there to argue and headed home, tired, hungry, and planning to spend the next 3 hours on the road. I stopped at a quaint little country diner to have breakfast before starting the long walk back. On the way, all I could think about was Stacy's suggestion to try again. Being single was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I had complete freedom to go where I needed to and do what I needed to do. I didn't have to tell anyone anything or worry about checking on anyone if I was away for a long time. On the other hand, coming home to an empty apartment and having dinner with TV was not what I called living a high life. I remember when she and I got married. It wasn't just quarrels. We had some good times, really good times. I kept going back and forth in my mind. I would never tell a soul about this. No detective as tough as me will admit this, but I cried when we parted. Maybe we could find a compromise. It was a little after 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I returned to my office. I was tired and irritated. Not only did I miss out on a $50,000 bonus, I didn't get paid at all. Of course, the downside was that the story would end up in the newspapers. It would be good for business. Taking a manila envelope from my desk drawer, I wrote on the front, "The Richardson-Wilson case," then put in my mileage records and some receipts for my accountant. Then I went to my email and typed Richardson's name into the search engine. Wilson wasn't lying. There were 2 backdating letters that he was talking about. I checked my file cabinet, and as stated, both copies of the receipts I gave Carla and the contract she signed were gone. I called the lieutenant and told him what I had found. I asked if I could just take a screenshot of the email, but he told me not to do anything until he sent a computer forensics expert to take a look. He said it would take a couple of hours, which meant I would have to stay and wait. Just what I wanted to hear. By the time the expert came and left, it was closer to 6 o'clock. On the way home, I stopped at a cafe and immediately went to bed as soon as I entered my apartment. The next morning, I woke up to the phone ringing. When I picked it up to answer it, I saw that I had slept through several more calls. "Hello," I said in a voice that indicated that I had not yet woken up from sleep. "Mr. McDaniels, this is Eloise Dowling from Chicago Tribute. I'm waiting outside your office. Are you coming soon yet?" "What's the matter, Miss Dowling?" "I want to interview you regarding your role in the arrest of Eric Wilson," she told me. Okay, everything was coming back into focus. I assumed the calls I missed were also from reporters. I looked at my watch. Hell, it was 9:20, and I hadn't even had a chance to shower yet. I still had to go down to the police station and give a statement. It was going to be a busy day. I asked Eloise to drop her card in the mailbox at my door and I would call her when I had some free time. After taking a shower, I had toast and coffee for breakfast. I was at the 1st District Police Station a little before 11. "What is this?" asked Lieutenant Reardon. I handed him an envelope 2 inches thick, the size of a legal document. "Wilson didn't choose me out of nowhere, Dan. For the past 6 months, I have been investigating his case on my own. I don't have hard evidence yet, but he was laundering millions for someone. He also has his hand in the cookie jar, enough to bring charges of theft, embezzlement, and possibly racketeering. That's almost all, but I've wasted enough time and money on this case, and it's yours," I told him. "Thank you so much," he replied sarcastically, as if we didn't have enough to worry about. We entered the interrogation room, where a videographer had already been installed. There was also a tape recorder on the table. After 2 hours of testimony, Reardon and I went to lunch. I've known him since he was a rookie cop, and I was still working for a security company. By the time I got back to the office, it was already 3 o'clock, and I was thinking about calling Eloise back. I can always use free advertising. Either that or go to Plato. I was still trying to make a decision when I heard my door open. Looking up, I thought it was another reporter. Not much surprises me anymore, but he definitely surprised me. I wasn't sure whether I should take out the gun or not. "Richardson, what are you doing here?" Without saying a word, he sank into a chair and tossed a letter-sized envelope onto my desk. "What is this?" "2 cashier's checks, the first for $3,600,000, issued to my former company. The second is your 10% search fee," he said. "Janet was worried that Walker would cheat you, so she insisted on 2 checks. I didn't believe it. What kind of joke?" "No joke, what can I say? I love this woman." "Sorry for saying this," I said sarcastically, "but you don't look like the type who could fall in love with someone worth $4 million. "Yes, well, you see, you don't know me as well as you think. I created this company, McDaniels. Created her using only his blood, sweat, and tears. And I made damn good money. I was proud of what I achieved. When I met Carla, I was on top of the world. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and she was crazy about me. Or so I thought. Anyway, after a year of marriage, I couldn't believe how much money she had lost. I should have put an end to it, but I didn't want to risk losing her. So instead, I thought about expanding the business. I met Walker at a party, we got to talking, and he offered me the money needed to develop the company. He was supposed to be a silent partner, but the next moment I discovered that his office was next to mine. He then began taking part in business and strategy meetings. We suddenly started doing business with Dubai's companies and changing suppliers. He and I constantly quarreled. One day, looking around, I saw that he had built his own small empire based on my company. The only reason he kept me around was because of my name, and I knew that wouldn't last forever. Walker is a snake, and I understood perfectly well that they were going to cheat me. Then I started putting together my own golden parachute. It only took me a year to lose these $4 million. My biggest mistake was underestimating you. You caught me red-handed, but I knew you'd never find the money. How Carla found these numbers, I have no idea. I know it had to be some stupid accident. What about Janet? How did she get involved in all this? She was my savior. I met her about 4 years ago. By that time, I already knew that my marriage was a complete fiction. Carla was seen running around the city with a dozen different men. I would have divorced her, but with all these problems with the company, I just couldn't find the time. My life was already difficult enough without a long and expensive divorce. When I met Janet, everything fell into place. She was beautiful, kind, and a good listener. She became my refuge. In the end, we fell in love with each other. Now I was curious. What about Kathy Hayer? What's with her? Katie is a friend, that's all. Walker's secretary said you had fun with her too. Dory always sees the worst in people. I think she thought I was having sex with Katie because I sent her flowers a couple of times. Come to think of it, I also asked her to order dinner for Katie and I once or twice. The truth is that she was having a hard time breaking up with her long-term lover. She was depressed, and I tried to show her that it wasn't her fault, that's all. Anyway, he said, standing up abruptly, now you know the whole story of my life. The cops don't want me to leave before the trial, so I think I'll be here for a while. But once this is over, Janet and I plan to spend the rest of our lives soaking up the tropical sun somewhere. Take care, McDaniels, were his last words as he closed the door behind him. One thing I've learned in my business is that there is no such thing as black and white, and there are always more than two sides to every story. I looked again at the check with my name on it, $400,000. I still couldn't believe it. On the way home, I took it to my accountant. I told him to put $20,000 in my account and figure out how to keep as much of the rest as possible from Uncle Sam, legally, of course. The next morning, I walked into Walker's outer office. Dory was no more glad to see me than last time. You're like a bad penny, McDaniels. I think he'll want to see me, Dollface. I have something for him. The bleached blonde pressed the intercom button and told Walker I had something for him. He will see you, she told me, pointing to the door to his office. I didn't sit down. I really didn't want to do this. If Walker was the fraud Richardson made him out to be, he didn't deserve what I was about to give him. Sometimes in my business, you have to do some pretty nasty things, and this was one of them. I took the envelope out of my inside coat pocket and threw it on his desk. He read the company name on the front. What is this? Open it and find out, I answered. His facial expression seemed to me to be about the same as my own. 3 million? 6, he almost shouted, looking at me. Did you get them back? What about the rest? I get 10% as a search reward, remember? No, I don't remember that at all. Richardson was right. Walker was a snake in the grass. I thought you might say so, I told him. So here's a copy of the contract you signed when you first hired me, I said, throwing the 3-page agreement on his desk. Okay, he replied, knowing that I had all the aces in my hands. I suppose I should thank you. Don't worry, I told him. I was looking at 38 the other day, but I think having to give you this money is the most unpleasant thing I've done all week. When I got to my office, I picked up the newspaper and read the policeman's account of what happened at the lake house. It's time to tell you your version. I borrowed a couple of chairs from the employment agency next door and called a small press conference in my office after lunch. This little Eloise was as cute as a kitten and looked at me with big eyes all the time. Stacy and I never put any limits on each other. We were both free to do whatever we wanted with whoever we wanted. A week ago, I had no doubt that I would have been dancing in the sheets with that little slut from the newspaper, but for some reason, suddenly, it seemed wrong to me. Then I checked my bank balance online and smiled when I saw that $20,000 was already in my account. I decided to take a chance and called one of the upscale restaurants in town and made a reservation for late evening. Then I needed to make sure Stacy was available that evening. When I told her where we were going, she said she had nothing to wear. I told her not to worry about it. I knew she was still wearing the same size as when we got married. I needed to go home and get ready, but first, I had to make a couple of stops. I rang Stacy's doorbell at 6:30, which gave her time to finish getting ready. She screamed when she saw the dress. Blake, it's beautiful, but how can you afford it? It must have cost a fortune. What, did you rob a bank? No, I was just able to finally get the debt. Now hurry up and put it on, we have less than an hour. Throughout dinner, Stacy questioned me about the debt I told her about. I just told her she would have to wait for the morning paper. I knew reporters would hype the story to sell more newspapers. Letting her read about it would help me stay humble. I told myself with a small smile. We ate the last bites of our desserts and were about to leave, finishing our coffee, when I decided it was time. Oh, I almost forgot, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. When she saw the Tiffany ring box I placed in front of her, she screamed so loudly that the entire restaurant looked at each other. Tears immediately flowed from those gorgeous eyes as she tried to slide the large pear-shaped diamond onto her finger. She raised her hand up for everyone to see. "We're engaged!" she shouted. We heard shouts of, "Congratulations!" followed by applause from both patrons and staff. I have a good accountant. I knew he would invest my money wisely, allowing me to be more selective in the clients and cases I take on. Life with Stacy has been absolutely wonderful. and I look forward to a wonderful future together. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. 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 Listening to the next one.